friends, welcome back to another fireside chat. My name's Case and this is Build a Lot Acres. In today's episode we're going to talk about pine. Is it okay to burn pine? Should you burn pine? Are there any benefits to burning pine? These are all questions that we're going to answer today. So I guess we should start off with kind of the myth. Can you burn pine? A lot of people are going to tell you no. It's dangerous. You'll burn your house down. You create more creosote in your chimney. All things like that. Sorry, the fire's getting a little hot here over at the fireside chat. So I guess we need to look at it with a logical mind. Certain parts of the country, mainly out west, Colorado and Utah, and even Alaska, a lot of these areas only have softwoods to burn. They don't have maples, they don't have oaks, black locust, cherries, hickories. These kind of woods aren't really available there. So to say that you can't burn pine or softwoods would be like saying that they must import their firewood, which simply isn't true. Think about it. Would they pay thousands and thousands of dollars to import wood to burn a stove when they could just turn on a switch and burn oil or natural gas or propane? It wouldn't make any sense for them to do that. So we need to realize they burn softwoods all the time. Now, you might be asking yourself, I don't know if they have any hardwoods, but consider this. These are all names of actual towns in Colorado. Aspen, Castle Pines, Conifer, Evergreen. Those are all names of actual towns in Colorado. So obviously they have a lot of softwood trees to name these towns after. So I think we can kind of dispel the myth that you can't burn pine. Another common myth about the pine is the pitch or the tar or the sap, whatever you want to call it. You can call it any of those three. You can't burn it because that will cause creosote in the chimney. Now, what most people don't realize is when you burn pine, you have to let it season like any other firewood. You can't just cut it and throw it in your wood stove. That's a huge mistake. If you did that with any type of wood, you'd have big problems. The creosote would build up and you would probably end up with a chimney fire. The two biggest things you have to worry about with firewood is making sure it's seasoned, which is going to vary for how long for each species of wood. And you have to make sure that you have a fairly hot fire like we have here. You can't burn it slow and low. That's when you're going to smolder it and create the creosote. You're not going to burn it hot enough to get the flue temperature up enough to get it hot. So that's one of the big things. And another thing to consider is that the tar or the pitch or the sap, that dries up when the wood dries. You cut the wood down, it's going to be full of sap. If you wait a few months and then process it and split it, you're going to notice that it has very little to no sap. So you really need to let it season. That's the key to pine or any wood, is letting it season. So now that we kind of dispelled the myth that you can't burn pine, let's talk about should you, or what are some of the benefits. Well, I would say the biggest benefit to burning pine would probably be the amount of seasoning time it takes. Pine, most species of pine are going to season in around 6 months. Some take a little longer, 9 or 12 months. But most pines, especially the ones around here, maybe an eastern white pine or a red pine, 6 to 9 months is all you need. Once it's split, 6 months later you can burn it. So, although you're not going to get a lot of BTU value, so although the pines don't have very good BTUs, typically around 12 to 17 million BTUs per cord. See later videos for describing what BTUs are and what they really mean as far as your cordwood. So now that we kind of dispelled the myth, we know that you can burn pine. We went over a couple of the things. Let's talk about some more. So not only does pine season quickly, it also splits fairly easily. If you had to rate pine on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest wood you could split, let's say a really hard elm, which is very stringy and tough, I would put pine at maybe a 3 to a 4. Not the easiest splitting wood. I would probably give that to red oak. You could almost touch it and it falls apart. But I would say pine is definitely on the easy end of woods to split. It's also very lightweight. Weighs half to 2/3 of what most other woods weigh. So you're not going to be breaking your back, picking it up to the splitter, or rolling the rounds around after you cut the tree. It's much easier to handle in the processing area than a heavier wood like an oak or hickory. So that's another thing to consider. It also starts very easily. You can see the pine in my wood stove. I didn't use any starters today. I got home from work. I threw in a couple pieces of pine, lit them with a torch, and within a couple minutes it was roaring, as you can see. So a couple other positives are going to be pine is great for allowing you to let your better woods season longer. So if you need some oak to season longer, because a lot of oaks are going to take 3 years to season. So you might not have quite 3 years of seasoning time in, and you need to still heat your house. Pine might be just the ticket, might be the golden ticket into the chocolate factory for you. The pine might allow you a few more months to let your oak season. It also will allow you to save your good wood for the really cold spells. You might have some mild fall days or end of season days in maybe March or April that are only 40, 45 degrees. You still need to heat your house, but you don't need tons and tons of heat, so you really don't want to waste your really good wood. That's where pine really shines, stuff like that. So I think the last positive we'd have to talk about is otherwise the pine's going to go to waste. If you're clearing areas for, say, a garage or a barn or a horse area, or you want to make your lawn bigger, and you're cutting trees, they're there anyways. You got to cut them down. Why not cut them up, split them, and burn them? There's no sense in throwing them away or pushing them off to rot. I mean, pine's fine. Don't worry about burning pine. It's great. Now, pine starts very easily. It burns great. It does burn hot and fast. So you do have to reload more often than you would with a hardwood. So that's another thing to consider, is there are some negatives to burning pine. We'll go over those. So now that we've discussed some of the positive, let's discuss some of the negatives. There are negatives to burning pine. I think the biggest one would be you need a lot more pine to heat the same amount of area or provide the same amount of heat than you do from hardwood. Whereas an oak might have 22 or 23 million BTUs per cord. A hickory might have 25 million. Black locust might have 26 or 27. Pine's only going to have 12 to 18 million BTUs per cord. Eastern white pine, for example, has around 12 or 13 million. A red pine has a little more, maybe 17 or 18 million, but they're only going to be around maybe a little over half to 2/3 of the heat value that the same size cord of a harder, denser wood is going to have. So you are going to burn more cords to heat the same amount. It's just a reality with pine. And I would say another negative is pine can be very messy if you process it right off, which I don't recommend doing. Once you cut the tree down, I recommend you let it sit for a few months, let the pine sap dry up, then process the wood, split it, and you'll notice it's a lot easier to deal with. You don't get sticky pine sap all over your clothes or your hands or the splitter. It's just a much easier and cleaner time if you wait a few months and let it season. It doesn't take long, just 2 or 3 months, that's all it takes. So I mean, other than those two, I really wouldn't say there's any negatives to burning pine, but I think it's a good wood. I think this has been a good discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I have. Hopefully you learned something. You can follow the channel, give us a like and subscribe, tell your friends, and as always, have a great day.